What is going on YouTube? Today we're taking another look at a highly requested video, and that's my Apex Legends Season 8 weapon tier list. Much like the Legend tier list we did last week, this of course is all just my opinion, and what works best for you might be a little bit different than what works best for me. My favorite and best or most used weapons honestly changes almost weekly, so this list is constantly fluctuating, but for the most part, nearly every weapon in Apex Legends has viability depending on how you are using it. The criteria for this list is mainly just my overall ability to slay out enemies in an aggressive fashion. Obviously, something like the longbow is going to be better for a ranged assault rather than something like the R99, but for this list, we are just looking at being an aggressive player who is making those pushes and making those big plays. D tier for me is underwhelming, C tier is average, B tier is good, A is amazing, and S tier are the best of the best. If you do enjoy this video, hit that like button, and I appreciate your support. We did recently hit both 10k subs and 1 million views on the channel, and the support has been truly amazing, so thank you so much. We also stream nearly daily on Twitch, so check it out if you have any more questions regarding weapons or anything else in Apex Legends. First up at D tier, we have two weapons that I consider to be underwhelming in Apex Legends, and that is both the Mozambique and the P2020. These guns honestly can be fair and usable off spawn, but beyond that they are pretty much trash. However, one big disclaimer for me is that if you can't find hammer points for both of these guns, then I will then put them in the B- tier, as they both can be pretty good secondary weapons. It feels surprising to say this, but the Mozambique can deal 100 damage in a single shot with hammer points when players don't have shields left, so this does give it a one-tap potential. Second to this, the P2020 with hammer points is also a solid weapon to spray down enemies at closer ranges after swapping from your main weapons, and this also gives you a fair amount of viability to really down enemies quickly if you are hitting some shots. But for the most part, I will always skip over these guns and move on to something else. A best case scenario for me is to drop on the P2020 with hammer points right next to it in the early game. This way, if players don't have shields yet, this thing can absolutely shred them. Moving on to C tier, let's start off with our two C- guns, and that is the longbow and the L-Star. These two weapons for me are both pretty average, if not borderline underwhelming. The L-Star has some early game potential as it does hit pretty hard, especially if you are landing headshots, but every other LMG or energy weapon is just going to outclass it in damage and accuracy and overall use potential. The longbow for me, a weird one, as it used to be one of my favorite guns in the game to run back in the Apex Legends Season 0 to Season 2 eras. However, the meta has really just shifted away from this weapon, as certain snipers like the charge rifle or the triple take are better choices and are easier to use. The longbow honestly isn't terrible or anything, but it does require a lot of attachments to be good, which is another drawback for me. I occasionally will pick this thing up, but I find the Sentinel is a more pleasing weapon to use and is a bit better as it does have a better one-shot potential. This brings us straight into the C tier, where we have the Sentinel and the newest addition to Apex Legends, the 3030 repeater. Due to the fact that the Sentinel can be charged, it has a bit more viability and is a better sniper rifle in my opinion. Also, it requires a lot less attachments to be decent with, which is another huge bonus in my book. There is something about a bolt sniper rifle in all shooting games that just feels so crispy to shoot with and to get solid headshots, and the Sentinel is no exception to this. This sniper is just lower on my list because overall, snipers just aren't the meta, but sometimes I will run snipers through early and mid game and then swap off for something like a shotgun for the late game. And I think this is okay. Overall, snipers are functioning in a decent way. It allows you to switch things up from time to time. The 3030 repeater is the newest weapon to the game, and while the 3030 does have its moments, for me it is just outclassed by similar weapons such as the G7, Hemlock, or Triple Take. The 3030 is fun to use, but for me it just has too slow of a bullet velocity, which in turn means it has a lot of bullet drop, making it very difficult to use at anything outside the closer to medium range engagements. One thing I will say is that it is nice to have a heavy weapon like this, meaning it could be a good thing to run this instead of a G7 if your teammates are using a lot of light ammo. It is nice to have this option. Overall, I do enjoy using the 3030. It just isn't the best for single shot medium range to close range weapons. Our final two weapons of C tier at C+ are both the charge rifle and the RE45. When the charge rifle was first introduced to the game at the launch of Season 3, it was an absolute insane weapon that has seen a fair share of nerfs over the seasons. The charge rifle for me is a really weird one because it definitely isn't the close range, aggressive playmaking weapon, much like this list is being catered for, but the charge rifle might be one of the best guns in the game for leveling up your Evo shields and just being really obnoxious to enemy players. I find it is a bit better than the two previous snipers for just overall damage over time due to its ease of use and its ability to really just get partial damage even if you are missing portions of your shots. The final C+ weapon is the RE45, and this weapon is also really weird because it can have some good moments where it shines in early game, and is also a great secondary weapon for quick and easy hipfire damage. This gun, however, lags behind the other light ammo powerhouses like the R301, which has superb range compared to this gun, and the R99, which just overall has a better damage per second. I'd love to see the RE45 get a buff where it has a much faster fire rate, but with a reduced mag size. This, in my eyes, would make it a great option to use as a secondary weapon instead of the Mastiff or the EVA 8. You could pull this gun out and spray enemies at close ranges, but it wouldn't have a huge mag size, which means it couldn't really be mained. But this is just an idea how to better switch up the Mastiff spam, which we are currently in. Moving on to B tier and starting with two B- weapons, and that is both the Devotion and the Havoc. These two weapons for me are good solid options, but have one big problem, and that is the turbocharger. Without this attachment, these guns for me are really underwhelming and a bit more difficult to use. I will say, similar to our D tier weapons, I think both of these guns can be B+ or even A- tier if you do get them fully loaded with all the attachments, but till that, they just require too many attachments to be proficient with. Another thing I will say is their energy ammo counterpart, the Volt, just seems to be a bit better at both controlling recoil, better range, and overall consistency to deal damage. Both the Havoc and the Devotion have had days where they were absolutely beasts in S tier, but for now, they are solid B- weapons that are good, but not crazy. We now have two weapons at B tier, and that is both the G7 Scout and the Triple Take Sniper Rifle. Both of these weapons might be some of the most consistent weapons in Apex Legends that are pretty easy to use at all ranges. For the majority of Season 6 and Season 7, I really felt as if the Triple Take was in a lot of ways just a better EVA 8 that could be not only used at long range, but close ranges as well. I still feel this way, but with the small EVA 8 buff at the start of Season 8, it isn't quite as comparable as it used to be. The G7 Scout is another weapon for me that is your typical easy to use single shot AR that can be good at medium and closer ranges, but does lack some of the punch that say the Hemlock or the R301 can do. I do think that these two weapons, the Triple Take and the G7, are some of the best mid-range weapons for those that want to try to be a bit slower and farm some more damage. So if this sounds like you, then definitely give them a try. Our final B tier weapon at B+, and honestly, the weapon I have had the hardest time placing on this entire list is the Alternator SMG. The Alternator is a tough weapon to place because it has some of the best range out of all the SMGs, but also has a slower fire rate. But because it does have a slower fire rate, it is so easy to control and do solid damage with. This SMG saw a small buff at the start of Season 8 that feels as if it is in the perfect spot at the moment. I honestly need to use the Alternator a bit more to really see how it shakes up, but I think it is a great weapon at the moment that definitely shouldn't be slept on. If you struggle with some of the faster fire rate SMGs, this weapon may be a good thing to pick up to get some confidence and build up your SMG skills in Apex Legends. I'm curious to see how running the Alternator as a more type of close range assault rifle could play out, and I think it honestly has enough accuracy and range to be used in this fashion, and I think we could see more players running this as the season progresses. We are now moving on to the weapons I deem amazing, and weapons that I will pretty much use every game if I do manage to find them early enough with the proper attachments. Our first weapon at A- tier is the EVA 8 shotgun. The EVA 8 in some ways might be a bit more reliable than its counterpart, the Mastiff shotgun. It is a great secondary weapon to run and one that is definitely usable. I will say with the removal of the double tap, its overall burst damage is a bit lower than it used to be. Also, it just doesn't have the same one tap potential as the Mastiff, which also, for me, does give it a bit lower usage potential. However, if you have great enemy tracking capabilities, this thing can absolutely shred, and I think it does a bit more consistent damage in the 30 to 50 range. Now we have three weapons, all heavy weapons at A tier, and this is the Flatline, Spitfire, and Wingman. Starting with the Wingman, this weapon honestly can be an S tier, but I have it at A tier because it is a bit more difficult to use and does require a lot of practice with to be effective. If you are capable of hitting consistent Wingman shots, then this gun will shred, and the gun is pretty much good even with no attachments, which is also a huge bonus for me. I think that this gun is better if you are a mouse and keyboard player, as a single shot weapon is generally easier to use on mouse and key, but still the Wingman is an amazing gun that every serious Apex player needs to be able to use. Our next A tier weapon, and honestly one of my favorite weapons to use, is the Flatline Assault Rifle. The Flatline for me just hits different. It is one of those guns that can honestly do a lot of damage in the close range, much like an SMG. Hipfire with this weapon is insane. If you can hit any sort of headshots with it, you will destroy your opponents. The recoil does make this gun harder to control at the mid-range engagements, but again, if you can hit good shots with it, you're going to destroy your enemies. The reintroduction of the anvil receiver does mean that the single shot on this weapon has a bit more viability at the further ranges. The flatline doesn't require much in terms of attachments, which is also good. It has solid arm sights, so really the only big thing that you need is a magazine. Don't sleep on the flatline and give it a try. Our final A tier weapon is a weapon a lot of people are loving this season. That is the Spitfire LMG. While the Spitfire doesn't have the same damage per second as some of the S tier weapons we will soon talk about, it is crazy just how much overall damage you can do with this gun. It has a really good base magazine size and is fairly easy to control even at the further ranges. The only problem with it for me is the iron sights, but finding any optic really isn't too hard. There's been a handful of games where I've been fortunate enough to find the gold Spitfire, and this thing absolutely shreds. This gun might be my weapon of choice if I am in a 1-on-2 or a 1-on-3 situations, just due to the fact that you don't need to reload as often, and I honestly think the reload is also pretty quick for its magazine size. Love the Spitfire, and if you are a Rampart user, you can't be disappointed with how this gun is currently performing. Our only weapon at A+ tier is the Hemlock Assault Rifle, and the Hemlock really saw a crazy resurgence during Season 7 of Apex Legends, and I debated putting this in S tier or A+ tier for a while. I ended up putting it in A+ tier because I do think there are some better weapons in it for the overall playmaker and those that like to make pushes. I will say though, the Hemlock is my definitive choice for the best all-around weapon at all ranges, close, medium, and long ranges. Hipfire at close range can be deadly, mid-range burst is superb, and single shot at long ranges is also viable and a good way to soften up enemies. I am happy to see that the Hemlock is still viable because it was pretty bad for a long time in Apex Legends, and I think it's in a good spot at the moment. Moving on to the S tier weapons, that's right, the best of the best. I was debating on even putting plus or minuses for the weapons, but I decided to go on and do so. Starting at S-, and it feels weird to be putting this at S- because it's a staple of the game, but that is the R99 SMG. You're probably wondering why S-, but if you haven't noticed yet, there's another SMG that we have yet to talk about. There is not much to say about the R99 that you probably don't already know. It is one of the best weapons in the game and one that you absolutely need to be confident in using. The ability to one-clip someone with the R99 faster than any other weapon in the game is the real deal and shouldn't be slept on. However, and we are going to jump straight to an S+ tier weapon since we are talking about SMGs, and that is the Volt SMG. The Volt SMG is my preferred SMG of choice this season, as it has incredible range, it's easier to control at medium ranges, and is a bit more friendly on the overall amount of ammo you need to carry than the R99. The Volt has really come to be my favorite in recent weeks, as it really just does have so much more range potential than its close range counterpart, the R9. The Volt also feels really good to use, even with no attachments, which makes it an instant pickup for me, and has really good damage, even if it isn't the fastest shooting SMG in the game. Moving on to another S tier weapon, and that is the R301, one of my favorite assault rifles in recent weeks. The R301 has also been being used more and more in the pro scene because it's an absolute laser and is one of the easiest to control medium range weapons that can also be used at closer and longer ranges with that anvil receiver. The versatile nature of the R301 makes it a favorite for me this season, and I will say one drawback for me is the amount of attachments it does need, but even at the base weapon it is still really good. My favorite combo in the game at the moment is to pair it up with the Mastiff, and this medium to close range combo really makes me feel if I am good to go at all ranges. So this does bring us to our final floor loot weapon, and that is the Mastiff at S+ tier. Similar to the R99, there isn't much to say about this weapon. It is super easy to use, and there is no better secondary weapon in the game that can deal as much damage in a single shot as the Mastiff. This makes it almost an instant pickup for me to run at the moment, as it does really just allow you to control the game and better win those 1-on-2s or 1-on-3s. While I do love the Mastiff and it feels good to use, I do think the nerf to the pellet spread during the middle of Season 7 was a good thing because it does reduce the overall usage at range. I kind of wish we had some more options though for the superb secondary weapons, and I am still looking forward to the day where maybe the Peacekeeper can make a return to really switch up the meta again. Another great thing with the Mastiff, and really any shotgun, is the fact that you don't need to carry much ammo. This is just another reason why it is often picked up, because it does allow you to carry more heals or grenades. So that is all the floor loot weapons. I'm briefly going to group all the care package weapons together. All of these weapons are S tier guns for me. The Prowler is a solid SMG and works as a backup weapon to your main weapon since it doesn't require you to carry any ammo. The Kraber is the only gun in the game with one-shot potential, and this instantly puts it in S+ tier in my eyes. And the Peacekeeper, well, is the Peacekeeper, and it again has the highest damage hitting potential for a close-range secondary weapon that again also requires to carry no extra ammo. I generally don't put too much thought into running these weapons as they are fairly hard to come by, but if I do manage to find one, it is always something that I contemplate picking up, and because they are easy weapons to swap into during the late game. Early game though, I generally won't take the Prowler because it doesn't have enough ammo to get me through a longer match. So that is my Apex Legends Season 8 weapon tier list. Drop a comment down below and let me know what is your go-to combo of weapons at the moment. I'd love to hear more from you, so join the community Discord as we do have a growing community of players and players that are engaged in healthy discussions in the game and always looking for others to play with. So hop in there and stay in touch with myself and our community. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the Twitch streams. Peace out.